Check out the full story on Amazon. Link in the description below. After hearing the news that colossal and his, or her, pantheon of entities and monsters had risen from the rift, Zach, Kyle and I were going to board a ship, one in a large fleet to intercept the monsters. Ben wasn't coming though. Last I had heard, he was in Mexico, trying to forget the shit that had happened. I remember when reading shitty horror novels involving world-ending giant monsters, I always thought, why the hell don't they just get the military? So a fuckload of military artillery would be assisting us, including a fleet of warships, a load of submersibles and submarines, a bunch of Navy SEALs and some fighter jets. And since we were scheduled to go to the fleet of warships and into the Pacific Ocean in a week, that gave us 7 days to prepare and collect as many resources as possible. The people who were assisting, more like taking us, the military wanted us to get as many people who specialized in this kind of thing as possible. And Zach got to know a lot of people and friends over his years of cryptid hunting. Though I also knew a few people, one of them being my blood. We had a few people in mind, specifically Marlo, the badass high school veteran and angler killer, Christopher, Alan, Sergio, and a few others, who Zach refused to tell me about. Despite that the trip we were going on could be one way, Kyle was happy about it. He should have been dead way too many times before, and at this point, he was cheating and beating the shit out of death itself. Zach and I would go back to Michael's town, the town of Washington that recently had a major drone infestation. From what I had heard, the CDC was still struggling to get the black gunk off the walls and the ceiling, so the school was still closed. Before the colossal incident, Michael had requested me to babysit Christopher, a 15-year-old, since his mother and my sister-in-law had died and Michael had to go on a business trip. I had no choice but to take him with us. And Christopher had a drone kill count of 100, so he would be quite useful in the case we had to engage in any close combat with any medium-sized humanoids. And he was very familiar with guns, his friend bringing one to school, and had learned how to use them during the week of infamous lockdown when Zach and I had gone and investigated. Before going, I called Christopher's cell phone. "Hey Chris," I said in my best uncle voice. "Your dad's going on a business trip for a few weeks, so I have to watch you. Problem is, I need to go somewhere in a week. But I think you'll like it. Does going on a battleship for a few days, maybe a few weeks, seem interesting? By the way, do you know anything about colossal?" I distinctly heard Christopher mumble, "Holy shit," before answering my question. "Hell fucking yeah!" Jeez, language. After a few hours and a lot of illegal beers, we arrived in town. "Damn, did your nephew kill 100 of those anglers?" "Yeah," I replied. "You saw the dead bodies, right?" But Marlo said he took care of most of them. We drove down a residential neighborhood and I parked in front of Christopher's house. He was probably inside screaming his ass off about a hacker in a video game, which explained why he came in the 15th knock. "Ready?" I asked him. "For what?" Christopher then remembered. "Oh, yeah, I just gotta pack up." I just stood there in the doorway. "You forgot?" "Kinda. Some asshole in an Xbox chat room was threatening to find my area code and kill me. I got distracted." "You got 10 minutes. Christopher rushed upstairs, and 10 minutes later he came back to the front door holding an extra stuffed backpack with a baseball bat handle poking out of the top. "What did you bring?" "A kitchen knife, chips, extra clothes, energy drinks, another kitchen knife, baseball bat, sleeping bag, and a homemade Molotov cocktail." This kid was good. "Where are you planning on sleeping?" Christopher walked past me and sat in the back seat of the pickup truck. "Oh, I was planning to sleep at your house until we got to the ship." "Good, because it's exactly what we'll do." We all got in the pickup truck and peeled down the road, going to pick up our next guest. "Where are we going to go next?" Christopher asked. "To pick up your old high school principal." Then I realized we had no idea where Marlo lived. "Speaking of which," I asked Christopher, "where does Marlo live?" After much confusion and a few phone calls, we pulled up in front of Marlo's house. He lived in a surprisingly large house, but much smaller than Sergio's mansion, and a fake gun turret was mounted on his Mercedes. Christopher stayed in the car, Zach and I walked towards the house and knocked on the door a couple of times. From inside, I heard Marlowe scream, "Fuck off, Phil!" I had no idea who Phil was, but we weren't him. "It's Roger," I yelled back. I heard Marlowe swear again and then get up, walking to the door and opening it. He had lost a ton of weight and shaved most of his beard, leaving behind a cluster of beard stubble. He was wearing a white undershirt and was in his underwear, holding a beer and a hot dog. "Hi." "Hey, yourself. School's still closed. Those bloody drone buggers cover the whole place." "Oh. We were just about to head out onto a military battleship to intercept colossal, and was wondering if you were interested. The military wanted us to get as many gun fanatics and monster killers as possible. Wait out here. Just gotta get my shotgun." He shut the door and went inside, and a few minutes later, he came out fully dressed in combat clothes, combat boots, and a combat soul. He was holding a 12-gauge shotgun with dual Taurus Raging Hunter revolvers strapped to his sides, a huge Bowie knife, and 2 shotgun straps with all kinds of shells and slugs. "So you ready?" I asked. "Fuck if I ain't," Marlowe replied. "So that's it. No confirmation. Nothing you need to pack, no people you need to confirm with before going on a deadly battleship in the middle of the sea to intercept an army of eldritch entities? Fuck it. School's closed. Still get paid on leave. I ain't got nothing to do for a month except watching football and skeet shooting." Marlowe was the kind of guy we needed for this. "Great. So anything else?" "Yeah. Where do we sleep?" "My house. I have a couple of extra rooms." "Now let's go. We still need to pick up a few more people." As Marlowe sat in the back seat with Christopher, he realized who was sitting beside. "Holy shit, is that Christopher?" My nephew smiled and waved. "Hey, Teach." With Marlowe and Christopher in the back seat, we went to our last destination in town, Blame Lockhart's residence. With directions from Christopher, we drove to Blame's house, and Christopher said that he would do the talking. According to Christopher, Blame lived in a relatively dysfunctional household, with his dad away most of the time, leaving Blame alone to do whatever the fuck teens do. Christopher knocked on the door while I stood behind him. A minute later, Blame walked out of the house and did some weird gang handshake thing with Christopher. Blame was a relatively tall kid, maybe a year older or younger than my nephew, and was wearing a gangster hoodie with a baseball cap and low-riding sweatpants. "Yo, dog, what's up? Sup, Roger?" I nearly burst out laughing at the incompatibility Blame had with this sentence. "Not much," Christopher replied. "He said we were going on a battleship in the middle of the ocean. Teach is coming too." At this point I realized that Teach was the nickname for Marlowe. "She's real, dog?" "Yeah, kid. And you'll get to kill anglers that you guys call drones." "Fuck, if that's what we're doing, I'm in," Blame said. Damn, this kid was also just like Marlowe. "Just gotta go pack up my shit and I'll be right back." A minute later, Blame came out with a duffel bag full of food, water, energy drinks, a pistol, 3 extra magazines, several knives, a can of gasoline, and bear spray. "Is your dad seriously okay with you going?" I asked Blame, already damn well knowing the answer. "Yeah, dog. He's on vacation in Florida, probably won't mind." The gang and I all stuffed back into the pickup truck and headed for the 5-hour drive back to my house. I may have refrained to mention the other reason why I decided to bring Blame. He was probably going to get his ass kicked by the military guys on the Navy ships for all his street talk, but Christopher would lose his mind if he didn't have someone to talk to. And based on the sheer fucking amount of eldritch monsters and things we didn't even have names for, very slowly, we were making our way to the Oregon mainland, and we needed all the help we could get. And that was also because we couldn't ask the government to fucking build giant Jaegers as they did in Pacific Rim. We pulled up into the driveway of my rurally situated house, and I could see how my 3 guests were surprised that a Marine Biologist, and a loser, could have afforded a house like this. "Holy shit," Marlowe exclaimed. "Hey Roger, is this your house? She's a beauty." "Where have I heard that before?" "Thanks," I said, before taking the 3 of them into the house, and I showed them where they would be staying for the next week, up until the battleship. I offered Marlowe one of the empty rooms or the basement, but he wanted to sleep on the couch, where Kyle usually ended up whenever, always, he got drunk. Blame and Christopher took the 2 other rooms I offered. The fact that my nephew hadn't seen my house inherited by my dead grandparents was a huge wake-up call that I needed to step up my uncle game. But then again, taking your nephew and a bunch of other guys from his high school to a battleship for who knows how long isn't that responsible. But it was going to happen anyway. Chances were, all the missiles, 50 caliber machine guns, torpedoes, and airstrikes probably weren't going to do the job at killing all the nasty beasties lurking under the deep dark waters. And there was also the fact that a good chunk of core was left up and running, and that they would be there to intercept our battleships and firepower. And as for the weapons, we decided to take things a little extreme. Supplied from Sergio, the gun fanatic, we had 2 close-quarter 50 caliber rifles, a fuckload of AR-15s, an actual military flamethrower, a box of matches, a few extra shotguns, Taurus Raging Hunter revolvers, and some incendiary grenades, along with some plate carriers and bulletproof vests. He dropped them off at my house's doorstep in an enormous wooden crate labelled with firearms. After getting used to the firearms, we all took to the crate of monster-killing weapons with my enormous backyard facing the forest. Marlowe instantly threw his old 12-gauge shotgun out the window and picked up one of the enormous Dragon's Breath shotguns and laughed. "Hell fucking yeah!" "These some nice puppies, eh?" Zach asked, firing off a huge spray of flames at the gun target. "You fucking said it," Marlowe laughed. "Damn, there's a grenade in there." I walked over to Christopher and Blaine to get them oriented with the guns in case the need would come, which was extremely probable considering the number of unknown monsters that could only be killed with a 50 caliber rifle. "You know how to use this?" I asked Blaine and Christopher. "Yeah," my nephew replied. "I saw Marlowe do it when we were trapped in the school." "Then she's yours." I handed him the rifle. Christopher struggled with the gun, wobbling with the heavy weapon, then steadied himself, aimed, putting on his protective headphones over a pair of foam earplugs. Then I realized that Christopher was standing up, something he shouldn't have done with his weight and strength. "Wait, hold the Christopher fired. Zach and Marlowe, who were trying out the new weapons, jumped at the sudden sound, and I saw the bullet hit a tree, completely decimate it, then go through several more thick trees. Christopher instantly fell on his arse from the force of the recoil. "Holy fucking shit!" I exclaimed. "That nearly knocked you over. I told you to fucking lean against something so you don't die." "Damn, that was so fucking loud. Don't fucking do that the next fucking time you fucking shoot it." Blaine took off his protective headphones. "Fuck yeah!" I sighed and went back to shooting. For dinner, I went into town with Christopher to a shitty Italian restaurant for takeout. "So, anything else interesting happen after lockdown?" I asked, trying to make conversation with the teen. "Kinda. I got a girlfriend." "Really? Who would date you? You're fuck ugly." Christopher burst out laughing. "I know, right? You're so gullible." "Well, your friend Blaine, how did he bring that gun into school?" "He always carries it. Don't know how, where, who, what, when, but he always has his pistol. And now he always dips his bullets in Clorox and literal human shit for good luck." I laughed. Christopher always knew the weirdest people, including the stereotypical quiet kid with weapons, another gangster kid named RJ Nizzle-Drizzle, a dead psychopath, and Lawrence's apprentice, Ryan, who used a fucking math book to stop a series of gunshots. Back to the present, Christopher and I walked out of the pickup truck and into the restaurant's parking lot. The standalone restaurant was situated right in front of the dreaded woods, a place that we needed to avoid at all costs, no matter how much firepower we had. As we walked in, I noticed that something was wrong. So fucking wrong. The place was trashed, like it had fought a war and lost, with the tables strewn about everywhere, broken glass littering the floor, and the lights flickering. Somewhere in the store, I heard something chew. I unsnapped the holster of my .45 Magnum and walked inside. "Be very careful. Things are probably going to get a little crazy." "Roger, why are you even going in? We could just go back to the car and GTFO, right? Never investigate, that's the biggest mistake." I sighed and checked if the gun's safety was off as I cleared the room. "I know, kid. but I need to go kill whatever's in there so Zach can document it for his work. Go wait in the car if you want. There are a few pistols on the dashboard. Christopher nodded and ran back to the car, locking it, and rolled down the windows with the rifle pointed at the store in case I needed cover. Okay, I yelled out to him. If whatever is in there gets out, kill it. If it starts winning, come inside and shoot it before it kills me. Got it? I heard my nephew yell back his answer. The chewing coming from inside the store had stopped, which concerned me. I also had a single small grenade in case things got too crazy. I now knew why almost everyone in this shitty little town carried a heavy firearm whenever they left the house. I walked to the back kitchen of the restaurant, gun in hand, and checked the area. There was blood everywhere, but that could have just been the expired tomato sauce. Well, I thought it was tomato sauce until I saw an arm in the corner. The only place I hadn't checked was the storage room, so then I checked that. Nothing. The creature, person, whatever it was, couldn't have gotten out the back door or the window because, assuming that it was large enough to bite a person's arm off, it would have made some noise. Without warning, I would have done fine with a warning, a 200-pound beast jumped onto my back and pinned me to the ground. My gun flew out of my hand and went across the room. The creature holding me down was huge, at least 7 feet tall, crouching, and had very long fingers and claws. It was humanoid and pale, very skinny yet very muscular, with backwards-facing legs, and a line of thin black spikes protruding out of its back. The head of the thing was weird as hell. It had a long, wolf-like skull as a head with unnaturally long, sharp teeth, and inside the black eye sockets were 2 deep, sunken eyes. It also had an impressive 12-point rack deer antlers atop its head. This thing probably wasn't part of Colossal pantheon, but just one of the things from the forest. Oh, fuck! I got one of my arms free and grabbed one of the kitchen knives that was scattered across the floor, and drove the blade deep into the motherfucker's neck. It instantly leaped off me, screeching, its blood spraying everywhere, including me. Oh, you like that, do you, bitch? I laughed. The monster stopped struggling, reaching up with one clawed hand to slowly pull the knife out, and dropped it to the floor. Then the creature's face opened up into 3 bony jaws, like the fucking Demogorgon from Stranger Things, revealing a fleshy maw inside filled with dozens of teeth behind the skull. I guess you don't like it. The monster screeched its lungs out and charged. I rushed to the other side of the room and grabbed my Taurus Raging Hunter and fired several booming shots at the monster. It screeched but didn't stop. The wounded monster quickly climbed up the wall, broke the ceiling tiles, and climbed inside the roof above me. Hey, Uncle, is everything okay in there? Christopher yelled. No, I'm not fine. The bitch just climbed into the ceiling. Stay in the car. I heard the massive monster move around in the ceiling, and I fired off 2 shots, but missed, and they were only effective at making the building insurance more useful. It suddenly screeched, grabbed my shirt collar, and pulled me to the ceiling, snapping at my face. I held the metal ceiling frame to stop myself from getting any closer, reached into my pocket and grabbed the small grenade. With my free hand, I grabbed it, pulled the pin, which hurt like hell, and threw it directly into the monster's maw. It bit the grenade, swallowed it, then started choking. I only had a couple of seconds left. I pulled out my gun and shot the creature's hand holding me 2 times, completely severing the limb. I dropped down onto the floor and ran like hell out of the kitchen, just as the grenade exploded, sending guts, blood, and monster parts flying. The explosion was mostly contained by the monster's skeleton, but a huge chunk of fucking wall flew and nearly hit me in the fucking face. Oh fuck, I exclaimed. And then I searched around the kitchen and looked for the spaghetti, meatballs, pizza, breadsticks, and vodka I had ordered before going to the store. I found it perfectly resting on the counter, unscathed by the epic fight that had just happened in front of it. I left the money on the food counter, even though the employees and shop owners were probably dead and eaten. The police could figure that stuff out later. I grabbed the shit and left the store, covered in monster guts. Hey Roger, are you okay? Christopher asked as I walked towards the pickup truck. I got the fucking takeout. As soon as I opened the door and stepped inside, the first thing Zach said was, "Holy shit, what the hell happened to you?" "I just battled the fucking Italian takeout monster. I blew it up. The pieces are still in the store if you want to go check them out later. I killed it." Zach and Marlowe had been sharing their cryptid hunting and military stories, and also discussing whatever gun fanatics discuss. Blaine was upstairs in the guest room playing Call of Duty with Kyle and screaming at some fucking arsehole bastard fucker. "Hey Blaine! Kyle! Man, I brought the damn food unless you want to go hungry tonight." "Oh fuck, dog," he said to whoever he was talking to. "I gotta go. My friend's uncle brought some fucking Italian food. But don't forget what I said, you're a fucking asshole bastard fucker." I could barely contain my laughter. In all our time spent fighting Kala Tegothoku's pantheon of supporters and monsters, we never really tried to find out why it wanted to come to the mainland. I personally just assumed that it wanted to rise, whatever the hell that meant. Zach had a theory though, and he discussed it with us over our cheap Italian takeout dinner. "So, Kala Tegothoku wants to rise again. His followers keep saying again, which implies that he probably attempted to take control some time ago before we could record it, and lost or got driven back to where he came from. That also means that there's some opposing force, definitely not humans, that are stopping or fighting him and his pantheon, such as another powerful old god or something like that, which maybe protects humanity. And an enemy of our enemy is our friend." Not really. Once there was another kid in my high school who hated Kyle named Tony, remember? "Oh yeah, I picked the shit out of that kid." "Yep," I continued. "And that asshole beat me up so he could let out all his pent-up rage and anger." "Why the fuck are we talking about your old high school now? We're talking about a literal national threat. The entire government of the US is going to be secretly involved, maybe some parts of Canada. Why don't we just nuke the fucker high into the sky? Isn't that what you did with the Gulper a month back?" "Yeah, we could do that, but the nuclear power and the bomb required to destroy Tegothoku and the rest of the creepy buggers will explode and reach the shore, kill civilians, and destroy the entire part of the ocean and boil the water. And don't you think the biggest nuclear explosion, the only nuclear explosion of the decade, is going to attract attention? It's hard enough for the military and government to make cover-ups for all this shit, including the military battleship activity we're about to go do." "Damn," I replied, throwing my empty foam food container behind my back. It completely missed the wall and tomato sauce exploded all over it. "So, are we just going to bomb them one by one and kill them with submarines and small bombs and battleships?" "Yeah, that's what we're going to do. We might need guns in case the fuckers get onto the ship." The next day, Zach had more or less casual assignment 100 miles away, in the backwoods of Oregon. Usually when I accompanied him, he or I would interview the surviving victims. But in this case, there were no surviving victims. The neighbors had investigated after 2 weeks of no activity from the winery owners. When they went inside, all they found were human bones and a bunch of blood everywhere. At this point, I didn't even blink an eye hearing the news. After facing gigantic leviathan life forms and all sorts of cryptids, monsters, thugs, and goons, nothing would surprise me. Marlowe said he had an important football game to attend on the TV, and the teenagers didn't want to go and die. So Zach and I threw our guns and shit into the back of the pickup and sped off to the winery where the killings had taken place. Zach didn't have a good idea on what had killed them, but I had a theory that it was a drunk guy who tried to eat the wine grapes. I had taken my Benelli M4, and my partner took his trusty sniper rifle for long-range kills. If it was just a pissed-off drunk guy searching for more alcohol, the sheer firepower we were carrying was overkill. Arriving at the wine farm, Zach and I set off to the woods behind the fields to search for any signs or tracks. I had no doubts about some hobo or monster just sitting in the woods, waiting patiently to get killed by a redneck monster hunter and an overrated marine biologist. "The hell is this?" I asked. There was a huge footprint in the ground, at least twice the size of my own. "Maybe a Wendigo track?" "Probably not. The track looks way too different. Might also be a huge fleshgate, skinwalker crawler, or anything else. This looks like a good place to set up shop. But first, we need to kill a deer. After much trouble and used bullets, we finally killed a deer to use as bait. I wasn't much of a hunter, but Zach was, which explained why he joined the hunters. After bleeding the corpse of the deer, we waited until dark, and I hung the dead deer off a tree as bait. Zach was positioned with his sniper rifle and AR-15 up in a large boulder, while I was on the ground with my Benelli M4 for close combat. Remember, if the thing comes near, wait until I fire. As the night dragged on, the thing didn't come. It got so boring that at one point I sat down on a tree stump and just played Jetpack Joyride on my phone, until I heard something rustling from deeper in parts of the forest. I put my phone away and I picked up the shotgun. The creature was large and dog-like, but slightly humanoid and hunched on its front legs like a gorilla. It was covered in eyes and small tendrils with very pale skin and a bulky body. Its head had an enormous leech-like mouth, with at least 100 razor-sharp teeth and 3 spiraling forked tongues. It screeched at me, charging. "I can't fucking understand you!" I screamed and fired several shots at the fucker. "Damn it, I told you to wait!" Zach yelled. He fired one enormous round at the creature, hitting it right in the mouth. A huge chunk of the creature's face ripped and fell off, and I gave out a whoop. But it suddenly leaped out and lunged at Zach, who was reloading, and tackled him to the ground. "Fuck!" he exclaimed. The creature and Zach stumbled and rolled down the hill towards me. Zach pulled out his knife and stabbed multiple times at the creature, even him struggling to get out the monster's grasp. "Get it away from you!" I yelled. "I need a clear shot." I can't fucking see that!" I decided to fuck it, and I ran up to the creature and stabbed it with my foot-long bayonet knife that I'd attached to the barrel of the shotgun. Zach had said it was a waste of money, but I told him to fuck off. The knife saved his life, because the knife stabbed into the monster's neck, instantly making it recoil and screech in pain. "Hell yeah!" Zach said, getting back up and drawing one of his many pistols out. The monster paused, stood back up, and growled. At this point, I could tell that this huge arsehole was part of colossal pantheon, probably some sort of scout, searching out the area. "Colossal will rise again," the creature said in a weird, deep, and inhuman as fuck voice. "So, is that Tegothoku's version of Allah?" The monster lunged out at me, but I sidestepped it, and Zach and I unloaded every weapon we had right when the momentum was carrying the monster. It finally stopped moving, but it was still alive. I stood over it. "Tegothoku will rise again," I replied. Yeah, we already fucking did that. I fired one last shot into the creature. One less monster in the woods. After the last intense monster hunt, which was also a normal day for Zach, we were at my house. Christopher and Blaine were away, just hanging out in those woods where all the kids went missing last year, and were never found. We were bored and Zach hadn't gotten a new assignment, so I brought up the idea of going back to the Corps headquarters, where we had the badass final battle involving a huge gasoline explosion and a grenade launcher. The base was probably partially abandoned in the wing where the explosion had happened, so Zach and I decided to show Marlon around in the secret evil organization base. The overrated security in that shitty base probably wasn't better than before, especially because it never got better when Corps said it did. But just in case, we brought guns. Lots of guns, and a few knives, a few grenades, and more overkill combat weapons. Also, getting reconnaissance on Corps was important, so we would get a sense of their current strength, and if they could still interfere with our battleships. Also, it was going to be fun as hell. So, the monster hunter, the ex-soldier, and the marine biologist threw the guns in Zach's truck, and just as the sun was setting, drove down the dirt road to the trail that led to the base of Corps. There were, as always, no actual security guards there. Either they were being cocky about their base of security, or we had blown up and killed every single one the last time Zach and I were here. Damn, is this the place? Marlowe pointed to the huge building in the middle of the massive field. A good chunk of it was blown up and crumpled, although I hadn't remembered the actual structure exploding the last time I was there. Must have just been another explosive thing that blew shit up after we left. We walked to the destroyed end of the building and checked the place out. I was standing on some rubble beside the exposed, huge and deep stairwell, the one leading down when something huge jumped out of the rubble connecting to the lower floors. It was a huge angler, one that was probably residing deep in the base when the explosion happened. Holy shit! Suddenly, a huge pale arm came out of the stairwell and caught the angler mid-jump in one huge hand. The monster climbed out of the destroyed stairwell and stood up to its full height, and bit the angler's head clean off, swallowing it. When I saw what the monster was, I nearly had a fucking heart attack.